We'll start this out, though, returning to the issue of funding for children with special educational needs and disabilities. It's something we've talked about on this show a fair bit over recent months, the so-called safety valve that local authorities can sign up to secure government help with funding, but that comes with caveats, which is why Dorset Council has signed up to it and BCP Council decided not to earlier this year. In fact, 38 English local authorities with high overspends on education have so far joined the Safety Valve programme. But Rachel Filmer from Poole has started a parliamentary petition against the Safety Valve programme. She has 7-year-old non-verbal autistic twins. She says services are chronically underfunded and they're being cut further under the Safety Valve scheme. I'm pleased to say that Rachel joins me on the line now. Rachel, morning.
Good morning, Steve.
And standard thanks for you coming on when I know how busy life can be with twins. We spoke about BCP and their potential to join the Safety Valve scheme. That was something that they decided not to do earlier this year, but you've now taken this issue and you're trying to bring wider attention to it across the authorities that have signed up to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a bit of background, there's many local authorities that have huge debts that put them at risk of bankruptcy within their education system. And most of that is because the cost of providing what disabled children legally are required to have is much more than the funding they get from the government. And rather than giving local authorities more money to make sure that children get what they need and are legally entitled to, they've come up with this scheme which essentially says we will give you small amounts of money towards your in-year overspend if you cut your services and your funding, which obviously will have a massive impact, not just on the children who need those provisions, but on schools and children in every class where those children will be placed.
The overspend is significant for a lot of local authorities, though. I think Dorset Council has had to negotiate the way that they are paying back the overspend. I think doubling the time that they get to repay it than would normally be offered in the Safety Valve scheme because the sums of money are so great. Yes,
and part of the scheme is that they're given targets for how much money they must cut each year in order to get that bit of funding from them. Dorset failed to meet those targets, so did several other local authorities who've had their deals either suspended or extended because they're being asked to do something that's really not possible to do whilst following the law.
So your hope then, Rachel, with this petition is what?
I'm hoping to, as you say, bring attention to it. I'm working with people in local authorities who have signed up. BCP's plan was rejected by the DfE because it was too long, essentially, and too costly, which suggests that in these other areas they've signed up to much more deep and harsh cuts. So I'm working with those people and they are kind of pursuing ways to challenge this at a local level, but we feel collectively that this is a national problem that needs a national solution at this point.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can do. They need more money. It really comes down to that.
Yeah, and I guess it can be a really keen issue if you are in it as a parent of a child who has special educational needs, but you maybe don't realise the impact that it could have on wider education. If you aren't a parent like that, if you aren't a parent at all.
Absolutely. Part of these deals is to take some of your school's funding and put it towards your debt. So that impacts every school in the area. In BCP, they've agreed to a 0.5% reduction, and that takes some schools below the minimum funding they need just to provide basic education for all children. On top of that, you have children with disabilities who now won't get the support they need in mainstream classrooms. So you can see quite quickly how that will affect all of our schools, all of our pupils, all of our teachers. It's a really concerning scheme, and it's hard to understand. It's quite complex, but I think people trying to get across to people that it will affect them whether their children have SEND or not.
Yeah, and we've talked on this show about the financial challenges that local authorities are facing. I guess for us in Dorset. That's been BCP Council, Dorset Council, and they have tried to balance the books as best they can, but there's only so much they can do with the amount of money that they are being given by central government to send education.
Absolutely, and services are already poor and falling short of what's needed. Legal duties aren't being met in many cases. So the idea that government can say to them, you must cut your spending further when they're already not meeting the needs of these children, it can't really be possible. And I think parents can challenge these unlawful decisions or practices. And so they may well end up having to provide that support anyway. And that's where we're seeing some local authorities really struggling to meet the targets that they've been set within this scheme, because it's not actually possible.
How are you feeling, locally about this at the moment? Like you say, the DfE rejected the BCP proposal for the way that they would join a safety valve scheme. I don't know if is this something that will potentially rear its head again locally later on this year, perhaps?
I think so. Yeah, they are, according to BCP, they are still in negotiations, and we are quite concerned because, they did come up with this longer 15-year plan that would have less of an impact each year. And if that's been rejected because it's too long, we are concerned about what the Department for Education are expecting them to be able to do in a shorter time frame. So we think the cuts could be worse.
Yeah, well, look, we may well talk a bit more about that at some later point. For now, I appreciate you coming on. Rachel Filmer there. You can read more about her story on the Dorset bit of the BBC News app. For their part, BCP Council's Children's Services Director, Kathy Hadley, has said, we've acted with integrity in making clear that we will not sign up to a programme that would see our services fall below the statutory requirements as set by government. She goes on to say their overspend's been caused by rising demand that's outstripped increases in government funding. The Department for Education says safety valve agreements hold local authorities to account for delivering their high needs services in the most effective and sustainable way. We only enter into these agreements when our specialist SEND advisors agree it will give young people a better service. BBC Radio Solent, 18 minutes past 8.
Steve Harris at breakfast.